You were never supposed to know this story. June 13th, 1901. Montreal. A scream cuts through the air of the Golden Square Mile, echoing through the opulent halls of the Redpath Mansion. Moments later, two bodies lie motionless on the polished floor. Ada Maria Mills Redpath, matriarch of one of Canada's wealthiest families, and her son, Jocelyn Clifford Redpath. A gun rests between them. The newspapers would say it was a tragedy, a moment of madness brought on by a seizure. But that's not the truth. What if I told you no police were ever called? That within hours the mansion was locked, cleaned and sanitized, every trace of evidence quietly erased. A private inquest held behind velvet curtains, no reporters allowed. The bodies buried within 48 hours. No trial, no justice, just a verdict whispered like a spell. Clifford was epileptic. It was murder-suicide. But here's the thing. Clifford had no history of epilepsy, no medical records, no known seizures. And yet, this single lie became gospel, and the Redpath name remained untarnished. Now ask yourself, what were they hiding? What was so powerful, so dangerous that the truth had to be buried along with the bodies? This wasn't just a family tragedy. It was a cover-up, a calculated erasure of something far more sinister. The Redpaths were no ordinary family. They were connected to railroads, to government, to wealth so vast it could bend the will of institutions. In 1901, power didn't come from money alone. It came from secrets. Secrets like the ones sealed within the Redpath Mansion. If walls could talk, they would tell you about the gunshots that night. 2 or 3. Peter Redpath, the family patriarch, gave conflicting stories, and Amy Redpath, the eldest daughter, held the household in her iron grip. Was she just a grieving sister or something darker? What was the role of Dr. Thomas Roddick, the physician who diagnosed epilepsy without an autopsy? He was Amy's husband, and he had influence, enough to silence a scandal, enough to rewrite history. You're about to descend into a case that doesn't add up, where every answer leads to a deeper question. They buried the bodies, but they didn't bury the truth. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. This is the Redpath Mansion Mystery, the story they tried to erase. And now, you're part of it. Picture the mansion that night, heavy curtains drawn tight, gas lamps flickering, casting long shadows across ornate wallpaper and polished wood. Outside, a summer storm brews over Montreal, but inside, the storm has already struck. Ada Redpath was found slumped in her chair, shot cleanly in the back of the head. Clifford lay nearby, a bullet wound in his temple, the revolver at his side. But something's wrong. The scene is too neat, too orchestrated. The maid, Rose Shallow, testified she heard 2 shots and then silence. Yet Peter Redpath claimed he heard 3. Why lie? Why change the number of shots? Unless he needed the story to fit. In this house, silence is survival, and the Redpaths had everything to lose. You see, in 1901, the Redpath fortune stretched across Canada. Railways, industry, politics, they were a dynasty. Scandal could destroy them, could unravel generations of carefully controlled power. That's why no police were summoned. That's why Dr. Roddick appeared within minutes, like a man already waiting for tragedy. He declared Clifford mad, seized by epilepsy, and signed the death certificate. No inquest, no autopsy, no questions, just a family mourning behind locked doors. But dig deeper. Ada had been ill for months, confined to a chair, unable to move easily. Why would Clifford kill her? No motive, no rage. The newspapers repeated the epilepsy claim as fact. But if Clifford wasn't sick, then who pulled the trigger? And who decided to silence the truth? Amy Redpath, the eldest daughter, had always managed the household. She handled the finances, she answered the doors, she gave orders. The weight of a dying mother and a troubled brother rested on her shoulders. Did she snap? Or was it colder than that? A decision made not in anger but in strategy. Remove the burdens, secure the fortune, silence the shame. People say grief makes you act strangely, but Mai's composure was ice. She organized the funeral, she closed the mansion, she erased the evidence, and when asked about that night, she simply said, "It was God's will." No tears, no doubts, just a verdict, handed down by the family themselves. You're starting to see it, aren't you? This wasn't chaos. This was control, mastery of perception, manipulation of truth. And in that mansion, truth was the most dangerous thing of all. The Redpaths knew how to hide it. But we're about to uncover it, layer by layer. Let's keep going. Let's walk through that house again, not as curious onlookers, but as witnesses to something calculated. The Redpath Mansion wasn't merely a home. It was a fortress of wealth, reputation, and legacy. Every inch designed to impress and intimidate. Ornate staircases, imported marble, tapestries from Europe. But beneath that beauty, pressure. The kind that festers in silence. Ada Redpath had been wasting away for months. Some say depression, others a mysterious illness that kept her cloistered in the same room where she would die. Clifford, her youngest son, was fragile, timid, a man in the shadow of a powerful lineage, struggling with expectations he could never fulfill. His life was routine, quiet walks, private tutors, never married, always under the eye of his mother and his sister Amy. Now imagine the tension, a house of whispers, no laughter, just footsteps echoing down halls like ghosts, servants who knew not to speak, family members who spoke only what was necessary. Then, gunfire, and silence again, too clean, too quiet. The coroner's report was brief. 2 deaths, cause, 1 word, epilepsy, no further inquiry. And with that, the Redpath name remained unsullied. But the details haunt. Clifford's hands, clean, no gunpowder residue, his wound angled in a way that suggests he didn't pull the trigger. The revolver placed perfectly between the bodies, and yet no one questioned. Why? Because to question would be to risk everything: reputation, inheritance, social standing. The Redpaths didn't just own wealth, they owned perception. They controlled who spoke and who stayed silent. And they had help. Dr. Roddick, the family physician and Amy's husband, didn't just sign the death certificates. He shaped the narrative. He told the press Clifford was ill, that the family needed privacy, that no investigation was necessary, and they believed him. Because when power speaks, truth bows. But here's what they didn't anticipate: time. Time has a way of eroding lies, of loosening the grip of the powerful. Now, more than a century later, we can see the cracks, the contradictions, the whispered theories passed down by those who dared to remember, the maid's hushed confession, the neighbor who saw figures in the garden that night, shadows moving where no one should have been. You weren't supposed to hear this, you weren't supposed to look this close, but now you're inside the mansion with me, and there's no going back. The truth was buried in 1901. We're here to unearth it. There's something about old money, something corrosive. It doesn't just buy luxury, it buys silence. The Redpaths understood that. They didn't need to erase the past, they only needed to control the present. Clifford's death was written off as madness, a seizure-induced murder-suicide. Case closed. But madness is convenient. It can be shaped to fit any narrative. Especially when no one dares to ask why. Why would a quiet, sickly man kill his ailing mother, then himself, in a house full of people, yet no one intervened? Why did the maid, Rose Shallow, hesitate before testifying? Her statement was odd. She heard shots, 2, not 3. She ran upstairs only to be blocked by Amy, who ordered her to leave immediately. That moment, small, almost forgettable, tells us everything. Amy was there, before anyone else. She controlled the scene. She kept the servants away. And by the time Dr. Roddick arrived, everything was arranged. His medical verdict was swift. Epileptic fit. No need for further inquiry. A closed room, a closed case. But if Clifford didn't shoot his mother, who did? The truth circles back to Amy, the eldest daughter, the family executor, the one who stood to inherit everything once Ada and Clifford were gone. Ada had been discussing her will before the incident. Some say she planned to divide the estate differently, possibly giving more to Clifford, less to Amy. Others suggest Ada wanted to leave a portion to charity, a move Amy opposed. These are whispers, fragments, But in a world of control and legacy, such decisions were dangerous. Threats to the Redpath name, to Amy's power. And the timing? Convenient. Within weeks of the deaths, Amy assumed full control of the estate. No opposition, no questions. But power leaves traces. Peter Redpath, the supposed witness, changed his account more than once. First he heard 3 shots, then 2. First he saw Clifford Weird at the gun. Later he claimed he arrived too late. Memory fades, yes, but fear manipulates. Was Peter protecting his daughter, or was he too afraid to challenge her? Fear was a currency in that house. Fear of scandal, fear of disgrace, fear of losing control. And in the Redpath Mansion, control was everything. You can almost feel it, can't you? That cold weight in your chest, that knowing that the truth was never lost, it was buried, deliberately, strategically, and now it's calling to be uncovered. Keep listening. You're not just hearing a story, you're walking into forbidden territory, and every step forward takes you deeper into the unknown. Now imagine the funeral. 2 caskets, polished and perfect, lowered into the earth at Mount Royal Cemetery. No grand procession, no public mourning, just family, close-lipped, unyielding. The gravestones were simple, almost sterile, names and dates, nothing more. No epitaphs, no tributes, just an ending. But was it? Funerals are supposed to bring closure. This one brought silence, a silence so heavy it lasted generations. No one in Montreal dared to speak of what truly happened inside the Redpath Mansion. Journalists were warned off. The coroner's report was sealed, filed away where no curious eyes could find it. The Redpaths had locked the truth behind wealth, behind influence, but the cracks remained, and over time they widened. Decades later, scholars and historians began to whisper. Some found letters, old, crumbling, written by servants who once worked in the mansion. Fragments of truth hidden between lines of fear. One letter mentioned the locked room. Another, the smell of gunpowder long before the maid arrived. Another still, this one unsigned, spoke of Amy's orders that night. Do not speak. Do not return to that room. These weren't coincidences. They were echoes of something darker, evidence of a night that didn't unfold the way the Redpaths claimed. Think about Amy, not just as a sister or daughter, but as an operator. She had the motive, the opportunity, the knowledge of every room, every shadow in that mansion. She didn't need rage to act. She needed calculation, control, a decision made not in the heat of passion but in the cold silence of purpose. Remove her sickly brother, release her from the burden of a dying mother, secure the inheritance, seal the house, seal the truth, and live unchallenged. That's not madness, that's mastery. And mastery leaves no witnesses, only questions. But here's the paradox. The deeper you look, the more it slips away. The truth becomes mist, shapes in the dark. But it's there. And once you see it, truly see it, you can't turn away. You become part of it. You carry it. Like a shadow that never leaves. Like a whisper in your ear. What are you willing to uncover? How deep will you go? This isn't just about the Redpaths. This is about control, power, legacy, and the cost of protecting them. Stay with me. There's more to see, more to feel. You've only just begun to open your eyes. Let's step back into that room, the one where Ada and Clifford died. Visualize the details because every object matters. The antique clock on the mantel stopped at 8:15 p.m. Was it broken by chance or did someone stop it deliberately? The revolver on the floor, a .32 caliber Smith & Wesson, family-owned, cleaned recently, too recently, and Ada's body, positioned with care, head resting gently to the side. Not the aftermath of a sudden violent attack. Clifford's wound, unusual angle, inconsistent with suicide. Forensic science was primitive in 1901, but even then these details were suspicious. The Redpaths knew that. That's why there was no autopsy, no photographs released, just words, carefully chosen, repeated like a ritual. Epilepsy, madness, tragedy. The perfect story. And it worked, almost. But time doesn't forget. Decades later, the room was dismantled. The mansion sold piece by piece, but some pieces remained. Diaries, letters, clues buried in archives. One diary, written by a distant cousin, recounts a conversation overheard days before the deaths. Ada, frail but sharp, expressing fear. "They want to take everything," she said, "even my voice." Who was she talking about? Not Clifford. He was obedient, passive, the kind who followed orders, not gave them. No, her fear was directed upward. Toward Amy, toward the decisions being made in shadow, and it didn't end with the deaths. After the funeral, Amy moved swiftly, sold off assets, closed the mansion to outsiders, burned letters, ordered renovations. A house once filled with life became a mausoleum, silent, controlled, and empty, but not forgotten. The neighbors spoke quietly of strange lights in the attic long after the family left, of servants entering but never returning, of whispers through walls. It's easy to dismiss such stories, folklore, superstition, but when power moves in secret, truth often hides in the irrational, in the things we fear to believe. The Redpath Mansion wasn't just the site of a crime, it was a theater of control, a stage for a performance that reshaped legacy. They didn't just erase evidence, they rewrote memory, and now, over a century later, we are left with the echoes that haunt those who dare to listen. The truth isn't lost, it's waiting, buried beneath layers of obedience, silence, and fear. And you, now that you've begun to see, must ask, what would you have done in that house? Witness, accomplice, or something else? Think carefully, because once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. There's a moment right before control slips when fear takes over. But in the Redpath Mansion, fear wasn't visible. It was concealed, channeled, weaponized. Amy didn't weep publicly. She didn't collapse in grief. Instead, she emerged composed, dressed in black, issuing instructions like a general after battle. That composure wasn't mourning, it was strategy, and strategy leaves no room for chance. Every newspaper article released in the days after the deaths carried the same language: tragedy, sudden illness, family privacy. The same narrative repeated until the public accepted it without question. But there was a break in the pattern, a forgotten article published briefly before being retracted. It quoted a local police officer who was turned away at the Redpath gates. Denied entry, told the matter was handled. No report filed, no follow-up. The officer's name, lost to time. His words, buried. This was no simple oversight. It was deliberate, a suppression of protocol, and someone had the authority to do it. Amy Redpath and Dr. Roddick weren't just influential, they were connected. Roddick, a prominent physician, had ties to political elites. Amy, through inheritance, held sway over business interests. Together they didn't need the law, they were the law within the walls of that mansion. But power doesn't erase guilt, it buries it, and over time guilt finds cracks to seep through. Rose Shallow, the maid, disappeared from records after 1902. No marriage, no death certificate, gone. Some say she fled to the United States, others claim she was paid to vanish. Either way, her silence became permanent, and with it the last witness disappeared. What remains is shadow, layered and cold, and in that shadow a truth persists. Ada and Clifford didn't die by madness. They were erased, for inheritance, for control, for legacy. And Amy? She lived for decades after, alone, in wealth untouched by scandal. She built libraries, funded charities, was hailed as a benefactor. But those who knew her, the few who remained, spoke of a darkness in her eyes, a distance, as if the weight of what she'd done never left her shoulders. Power demands sacrifice, and in the Redpath Mansion, that sacrifice was blood. Now you know. Now you've heard what was never meant to be spoken. If you feel it, deep in your gut, the shift, the awareness, then type it below. I see through shadows. I see through shadows. Let it be known. Let it be sealed. Because truth is a burden, and you've just accepted it. The truth. It clings to the Redpath Mansion like mold on forgotten stone. Long after the bodies were laid in the ground, the house stood, silent, looming, watching. Decades passed. Tenants came and went, yet none stayed long. They spoke of unease, of cold drafts where no wind should reach, of voices whispering down empty halls. You can dismiss it as folklore, the stuff of ghost stories told by flickering candlelight, but beneath those whispers lies something real, the residue of a cover-up so complete it warped reality. You see, when you murder not just people but history itself, the world remembers in strange ways. And the Redpaths weren't done. In 1935, Amy commissioned a complete demolition of the mansion's interior. Walls were gutted, floors torn out. No explanation given. Just destruction, cleansing, erasure. They said it was modernization, but those who watched the workmen knew better. Furniture was burned, portraits discarded, entire rooms vanished, blueprints altered to hide what once existed. They weren't renovating, they were eliminating. Eliminating the scene of a crime that had festered for decades in silence, and with it, the last traces of that night. But secrets don't die with walls. They survive in the people who remember, in the few who dared to ask, why destroy a legacy home so thoroughly? Why rewrite its very structure unless something damning remained? A contractor's journal found years later held a single disturbing entry. Hidden compartment in West Parlor. Empty. Sealed. What had been there? A letter? A will? Evidence? We'll never know. But the need to hide it, still clear as blood. Amy Redpath passed away in 1954, hailed as a philanthropist, a woman of culture, but her wealth, her legacy, it was built on silence, on a foundation of death and denial. And beneath her polished reputation, the shadow of June 13, 1901 lingered, poisoning every echo, laid every donation. The mansion, now gone, lives only in memory and fragment. But you've seen what they buried. You've walked the halls, stood in the room, felt the pulse of something unspeakable. This isn't just a murder mystery. It's a case study in power, in the lengths to which the elite will go to control narrative, perception, truth. The Redpaths were not unique. They were a blueprint. And you're holding it now. The question is, what will you do with it? Because this knowledge isn't safe. It never was. In the shadows of power, every truth is a threat. And the Redpath Mansion, now reduced to rubble, still holds dominion over those who understand what happened within its walls. Let's go back once more. Not to the moment of death, but to the days before. There was tension in the house. Servants spoke in hushed tones. Visitors were scarce. Ada, frail and withdrawn, had reportedly confided to a neighbor that she was being watched, even in her own home. Clifford, too, seemed unsettled. A letter he penned, never sent, was found among his belongings. In it he wrote, "I fear Mother is not safe. I fear I am not safe. But to speak is to risk everything." These are not the words of a man preparing for murder. They are the words of a man cornered, powerless, and watched. But watched by whom? The answer leads us again to Amy, always present, always calm, always in control. She was not just a sister, she was the enforcer of the Redpath name, and enforcement demands loyalty or silence. The household was sealed from outsiders. Even relatives were turned away in the weeks leading up to the deaths. Why? Because isolation is the first weapon of manipulation. Control the environment, and you control the minds within it. The walls of that mansion didn't just shelter, they suffocated. They absorbed fear, twisted truth, and imprisoned those who lived behind them. Amy had the motive, the family estate. She had the means, proximity, authority, the trust of all involved. And she had the opportunity. No one else had access to both victims in the final moments. Then, consider the speed. Within hours, a doctor's verdict. Within a day, funeral preparations. Within 2, the ground closed over the bodies. No time to question, no time to think, just a narrative pushed forward by force. Amy understood something few do. Delay invites danger. Hesitation invites scrutiny. She didn't hesitate. She erased. And by the time anyone could think to ask why, it was already too late. History had been sealed, but not completely, because these fragments, these inconsistencies have endured, and they demand your attention. Not just to know the past, but to see how power operates in every era. The Redpaths aren't alone, they are emblematic, a symbol. And if this can happen in plain sight, beneath wealth and grace, then what else has been hidden right before your eyes? Keep listening. We are not done. We've only begun to see. You may think this was just one family, one tragedy sealed by time. But what if I told you that the Redpath case was not isolated, that it was part of a pattern, one that threads through history like a serpent in the grass, coiled and waiting? The weapon isn't always a gun. Often it's silence. Often it's the manipulation of truth, sealed beneath titles like philanthropist and visionary. The Redpaths used their influence to silence justice. Others before and after them have done the same, but few so perfectly, few so coldly. Consider the institutions that helped them. The newspapers that printed the epilepsy story without question, the coroner who closed the case without inquiry, the police who stood at the mansion gates and walked away. That's not just influence, that's domination. A complete psychological control system where perception is molded and reality becomes what the powerful decree it to be. And when you control perception, you control history, you control legacy, you erase guilt not just from law but from memory. Think of it, how many more Clifford Redpaths have been silenced? How many more Ada Redpaths buried without truth? What makes this story dangerous is not just the crime, but the machinery behind it. A machinery that still exists. It wears different faces now, corporate, political, elite, but its purpose remains. Protect the few, manipulate the many, conceal the cost. The Redpaths were a prototype of something larger, more enduring. Their mansion now gone is a symbol of that larger machine, a monument to what happens when truth threatens power. And you now have seen inside. You've felt the chill of that house, the weight of its silence, the lies polished to appear as truth. And once you've seen it, you begin to see it everywhere, in headlines, in history books, in the quiet hesitations of those who know more than they say. This story is a mirror's. It shows us the hidden face of power, the one that smiles while it erases. And the question you must ask is this: what other truths have been buried? What other houses of silence stand untouched, their secrets waiting for someone, anyone, to ask the forbidden question: what really happened? The Redpath Mansion is gone, but its legacy, its darkness, remains. Watching, waiting, just like the eyes that now follow you. Because once you know, they know you know. There is something ancient about this kind of silence. It's not just secrecy, it's ritual, a carefully executed cleansing of memory. And the Redpaths, they followed the ritual perfectly. In 1901, Ada and Clifford's deaths were not merely personal, they were symbolic. They marked a transfer of power, a shift in control, executed under the guise of tragedy. But here's what they didn't anticipate: fragments, little pieces of truth they couldn't erase. A surviving note from Clifford, found hidden in a book years later, simply read, "She watches me. I can't breathe." Who was she? We know who. Amy Redpath, the center of control, the guardian of the family's public image, the one who stood to lose everything if the truth came out. And so she didn't let it. Her influence spread outward like a web, capturing media, silencing staff, sealing records. But webs fray. And in those frayed strands we glimpse what they tried to hide. Clifford's journals, scattered pages retrieved from the ashes of a burned room, tell a different story. Not a madman, but a man trapped, observed, controlled. He wrote of shadows moving at night, of being drugged, of voices behind walls. Madness, perhaps, but madness induced, not born. And then there's the missing will. Ada Redpath, weeks before her death, was known to be revising her estate. That will was never found. The only one presented after the deaths, dated months earlier, with Amy named sole executor. Coincidence or design? And remember the maid, Rose? Before she vanished, she reportedly confided in a friend that the wrong person died. It's a cryptic statement, but potent. Who was meant to die that night? Was it Ada, Clifford, or someone else entirely? Could it have been a plan gone awry? A night meant to look like one thing and become another? We'll never know for certain, but we know enough. Enough to see the outlines of a manipulation so deep, it rewrote lives and history. And if they could do it then, with far fewer tools, fewer eyes watching, what can be done now? What is being done now? Because the ritual continues, the actors change, the stage evolves, but the purpose is eternal. Protect power at any cost, erase resistance, control truth. And the Redpath Mansion? It wasn't just a house, it was a temple of that purpose, a dark sanctuary. And we have entered it, together. Now ask yourself, what will you carry out with you? You feel it now, don't you? That slow unraveling. The story you thought you knew has decayed, leaving something raw, something ancient beneath. Power is not about wealth alone. It is about narrative. The Redpaths understood this, and they wielded it like a weapon. In 1901, public trust was a delicate thing. Reputation meant survival, and the Redpaths had cultivated theirs for generations, pioneers, philanthropists, builders of industry. But behind every monument lies a grave. Clifford's death wasn't just silencing a weak link, it was pruning the family tree, ensuring only the strongest, only the most loyal, remained. And Ada? She was more than a mother. She was the last moral tether in that house, the only one who might have spoken the truth. Her removal was necessary, clean, precise, efficient. That's how you maintain a dynasty, not with love, but with obedience. After the deaths, Amy didn't retreat. She expanded. She leveraged the tragedy into sympathy, and then into opportunity. Charitable foundations, public works, her name etched in stone, not as a suspect, but as a savior. This is how power endures. It mutates, it camouflages, it speaks the language of virtue while it buries its sins beneath accolades. But Amy wasn't alone. She was supported by advisors, by clergy, by financiers, a network that ensured her version of events became the official version. This network was not new. It was part of an older system, one that has always protected the few who know how to serve it. Think of every detail. The closed inquest, the absent police, the burned letters, the destroyed will. These are not random. They are marks of institutional complicity. The system served its purpose, and Clifford and Ada were sacrificed to it. Not out of malice, but necessity, the cold logic of control. We like to think we are free. That truth will always surface. But the Redpath case shows us other puntos here. It shows us that truth can be managed, bent, suffocated under weighty names and polished smiles. And what we are told is real, often is not. You are seeing it now, clearly, and that vision will cost you, because once you know how power really works, you are no longer just an observer. You are a threat. They buried Ada and Clifford, but they couldn't bury the fracture in their legacy, and now, through you, that fracture widens. Do you know what haunts most men? Not the fear of death, but the fear of irrelevance, of being forgotten, of vanishing without a trace. But Clifford Redpath did not vanish. His memory was hijacked, twisted, weaponized. They called him weak, epileptic, mad. But his writings, what little survived, paint a different picture. Clifford was aware. He knew he was being watched, manipulated, controlled. He just didn't know how to escape. In one recovered letter, likely written days before his death, he penned a single chilling line. "They whisper when I sleep, and when I wake I feel less like myself." What does that mean? Medication, manipulation, psychological erosion? Today we might call it gaslighting. Then it was simply obedience. In that mansion, Clifford was not a man. He was a pawn. And Ada? She was the queen. A queen who had outlived her usefulness. Her wealth, her will, her decisions, no longer aligned with the future Amy and her allies desired. Power cannot be shared. It must be centralized, absolute. So Ada, too, was removed. But understand, this was not murder in the traditional sense. This was a sacrifice, a cleansing, a reset. The old guard, eliminated. The new, enthroned. Amy Redpath emerged untouched. Her name inscribed on institutions, on universities, on libraries. She became a symbol of refinement, progress, culture, but beneath every plaque bearing her name lies a foundation of blood, You've walked into that blood now, and it stains. The Redpath Mansion was demolished in the 1980s. The land sold, redeveloped, another erasure, another rewriting of history. Today, few in Montreal even know what once stood there. But the ground remembers. The truth seeps into soil, into stone. And the question remains, how many other families have done the same? How many other tragedies are carefully crafted transitions of power? The Redpaths were merely one chapter in a longer book. A book written in secret, read only by those willing to see. And now you are reading it, page by page. But beware, because this knowledge is not without consequence. The deeper you go, the more you will see the world differently. You will see the strings behind the curtain, the hands that move the pieces, and you'll realize most men are pawns. But you are not. You've seen too much now. You've begun to awaken. Let's return once more to the night it happened, the air thick with heat, the storm clouds rolling in, the mansion unnaturally still. According to official accounts, Clifford snapped. A fit of epilepsy, a sudden madness. But the timeline doesn't fit. Witnesses outside the mansion reported the lights flickering on and off throughout the evening, not just in one room but all over the house. Someone was moving deliberately, preparing. Inside, the servants had been dismissed early, an unusual occurrence. Only Rose Shallow remained, isolated in the kitchen, far from the drawing room where Ada and Clifford would soon lie dead. A clock stopped at 8:15 p.m. 2 gunshots. Or was it 3? Peter Redpath, the elder brother, claimed he heard them from the garden, but the layout of the house made that nearly impossible. Either he lied or someone wanted him to lie. Dr. Roddick's arrival was too swift. Records show he was at his clinic across town, yet he appeared at the mansion less than 10 minutes after the shots were heard. How? Was he already there? Was he waiting? His medical report, hurriedly scribbled, lacked detail, no description of the wounds, no mention of the revolver's position, just the word epileptic. A word that silenced the room, a word that ended all inquiry. And Amy? She didn't weep, she didn't faint. She stood by the hearth, watching, her voice calm as she gave orders. Seal the room. Call no one. Later she said it was to protect the dignity of the dead. But dignity was a mask. The truth? She needed control, total control. And she got it. Within hours the bodies were removed, the room cleaned, the revolver disappeared, later returned with no fingerprints, no trace of recent use. The coroner arrived, signed what he was told to sign, and left. By morning, it was as if nothing had happened. The city went on, unaware that inside one of its grandest homes, history had been rewritten, not with evidence, but with silence. And that silence was enforced, not just by fear, but by loyalty. The Redpaths rewarded loyalty. Servants who cooperated were paid handsomely and vanished. Those who questioned, they never spoke again. You begin to see it now, don't you? This wasn't just a crime. It was an operation, a flawless removal of obstacles in pursuit of total control. The question is, who designed it? Who truly held the reins? The answer lies deeper still. The architect of the operation, Amy Redpath, was far more than a grieving daughter. She was the strategist, the executor, the keeper of the family's future. From the moment Ada's health declined, Amy began reshaping the household. Subtle changes, dismissal of long-time staff, restriction of visitors, rooms once open to guests were locked, curtains drawn perpetually. Even Clifford, the youngest son, was isolated, his walks shortened, his conversations monitored. Amy claimed it was for his health. In truth, it was preparation. She was consolidating power. Ada still held legal control over much of the Redpath estate, but her will was rumored to be changing. Rumors Amy could not afford to let manifest. With Ada gone and Clifford deemed unstable, Amy would inherit everything. And she did, swiftly, without challenge. The will produced after Ada's death bore Amy's influence. The signature was real, but the circumstances, never investigated. Clifford's mental state, so crucial to the epileptic narrative, had no medical history to support it. Dr. Roddick provided all the documentation, all the testimony needed to cement Clifford's madness. But he was no impartial observer. He was Amy's husband, bound by marriage, bound by ambition. And ambition is a dangerous fuel. Together they shaped the perfect crime. A murder that appeared to be no crime at all. A tragedy sanitized by wealth and reputation. In the weeks that followed, Amy was tireless. She appeared in public, composed and gracious, speaking softly of her family's loss while quietly maneuvering behind the scenes, closing accounts, selling properties, burning correspondence. She left no trace. And then she disappeared from public life for over a year. No explanation, no records, just absence. When she re-emerged, it was as a patron of the arts, a benefactor to universities, her past untouched, reinvented, but shadows don't fade so easily. Stories lingered, servants whispered, and in those whispers, a name returned again and again. Victor Marchand, a legal advisor to the family, present in the mansion days before the deaths. His name never appeared in official reports, but his sudden departure from Montreal shortly after speaks volumes. Some say he was paid to ensure the will was valid. Others claim he witnessed something that forced him into exile. What did Victor see? And why did he never return? One more thread, pulled tight in a tapestry of lies. The deeper we go, the more we see. This wasn't just Amy's design. Others helped, others knew. This was a conspiracy woven in silence, and it is unraveling. Victor Marchand's disappearance was no accident. Within days of the deaths, he left Montreal under the cover of night, resigning from his post without notice. He told no one where he was going, no family, no colleagues. He was a man erased. But why? Those who knew him described Victor as methodical, loyal, but not blind. He'd served the Redpaths for years, overseeing financial transactions, legal affairs, and critically, the redrafting of Ada's will. That missing will, the one Ada was believed to have updated just days before her death. Victor had it, or at least he knew where it was kept. The Redpaths claimed it was lost, destroyed in the chaos. But Victor's private journals, unearthed decades later in a remote estate in Quebec, tell a different story. One entry, dated June 12, 1901, the night before the tragedy, reads, "I fear tomorrow will change everything. The document is no longer safe here. I must act." No document was ever found, no copy, just that entry, proof that Victor knew what was coming, or at least sensed it. And then he vanished. His estate passed through distant relatives, and no further record of his life exists beyond that journal. The implication is clear. Victor saw too much. And in the Redpath world, seeing was dangerous. In a system built on silence, even knowledge is a threat. Which brings us back to the heart of this mystery. The weapon wasn't just a gun, it was fear, psychological control, a network of loyalty and intimidation so complete that even those close to the family were silenced, not through violence but through erasure. Victor chose exile. Others chose silence. Amy remained at the center, untouched. She had anticipated every move, every possible threat neutralized. But power leaves traces, and now those traces are bleeding through time. You've heard them, the vanished will, the fleeing advisor, the staged crime scene, the manipulated diagnosis. One by one, the illusions crack, and what lies beneath is raw, unforgiving. Amy Redpath didn't just inherit a fortune, she engineered a dynasty built on control, obedience, and a single terrible act. And now, more than a century later, that act demands reckoning. This isn't about ghosts, it's about legacy, and whether you can bear to carry the truth that was meant to be buried, because from here on, the descent deepens. In the quiet aftermath of the Redpath tragedy, as newspapers moved on and society shifted its gaze, a darker game was underway. Amy Redpath was not just managing grief. She was managing perception, consolidating influence, ensuring the world remembered only what she allowed. Months after Ada and Clifford were laid to rest, Amy commissioned a private investigation, not by police, but by a discreet firm in New York known for reputation management among the elite. Their task? Locate any remaining documents, letters, journals, anything that could contradict the official story. This wasn't about justice, it was containment. Reports suggest they found something. A ledger, small, bound in leather with Ada's initials pressed into the cover. It contained notes, daily entries, the musings of a woman watching her world close in. One entry stands out. He said, "The house no longer feels like mine, that I should prepare. But prepare for what? I fear what Amy has become." That was written 10 days before her death. The ledger vanished, never entered into evidence, never mentioned again, except in a receipt tucked into the archives of the private firm, noting its delivery to AR Montreal. Amy received it, she read it, and then, likely destroyed it. But fragments remain, and with each recovered fragment the picture sharpens. This was no spontaneous tragedy. It was a coup, quiet, calculated, and absolute. Amy did not mourn. She evolved, took her place as matriarch, steward of the Redpath name. But power breeds paranoia. She never married again, rarely entertained guests. Her letters became terse, guarded, and in one, written years later to a confidant, she wrote, "There are shadows that follow us, not because of guilt, but because of truth unspoken." She knew. The mansion, once vibrant with social gatherings, became a shell. Servants rotated frequently, never staying long, never speaking publicly. And in the rare moments Amy appeared in public, her gaze was distant, hollow, as if haunted, not by spirits, but by memory. That is the cost of truth buried beneath power. It doesn't die, it corrodes. And now you stand in its path. You know what Amy tried to erase. You see it with clarity, and it changes everything. Because this is not just her story. It's a mirror, reflecting how history is shaped, not by facts but by force. The descent continues. Are you still with me? Amy Redpath's isolation in the years after the deaths was no accident. It was self-imposed exile behind gilded walls. From the outside, she remained a pillar of Montreal's elite, her name etched into halls of learning and charity. But inside her private quarters, the world grew smaller. The windows were often shuttered, rooms untouched since that fateful night were sealed, dust collecting like time itself had stopped. She lived alone in the echo of that house, her footsteps the only sound in corridors once filled with family. And yet it wasn't solitude she feared. It was memory. Amy kept a box in her study, according to one housemaid who broke her silence decades later. The maid, a young Irish girl named Fiona, claimed she once glimpsed its contents when cleaning: a revolver wrapped in velvet, a folded letter, and a small brooch that had belonged to Ada. Fiona never asked questions. She was dismissed the next day, her wages doubled, and her contract voided. She left Montreal within the week. The box was never seen again. But what was in that letter? Was it Ada's final words, a confession, or a warning? Whatever it was, Amy kept it close, proof of something unspoken. Her control over the past was absolute, yet her need to hold on to these artifacts suggests fear. Fear of the truth, fear of exposure. She could silence the world, but not the weight of what she'd done. In her final years, Amy's health declined. She withdrew further, seeing only Dr. Roddick and a few trusted aides. No memoirs, no confessions, just silence. And then, in 1954, she died quietly in her sleep. No fanfare. Her will left generous donations to universities, hospitals, churches. Her name immortalized in stone. But nowhere, not once, did she speak of Clifford or Ada. They were erased from her legacy, just as they had been from her life. And yet the mansion remembered. Before its demolition, workers reported strange finds: scratches on the inside of a sealed wardrobe, a faint bloodstain beneath layers of wallpaper, and in the attic, a trunk filled with letters, all burned. Their contents lost, but the intent clear. No history, no truth, just ash. Amy Redpath controlled every ending, except this one. Because now, the story is being told. And you, standing in the ruins of her silence, are finally hearing what was never meant to be heard. The Redpath Mansion's final days were as unsettling as its history. By the late 1970s, it stood as a decaying monument to secrets long buried, its once grand halls rotting, its windows shattered by time and neglect. Developers saw only land value, but locals, they whispered. They crossed the street to avoid it. Children dared each other to step inside. Those who did spoke of strange noises, doors creaking open on their own, cold drafts that felt like breath, and the sound of faint weeping from the upper floors. Of course, these were dismissed as childish fantasy, but in 1986, demolition crews arrived, and something happened. 2 workers refused to return after the first day. One claimed to have seen a woman in black at an upper window. Another said he found a hidden door behind a crumbling wall, a door leading to a bricked-up room. That room, once forced open, revealed nothing but dust, decay, and a single object, a broken mirror, its shards scattered across the floor and scratched into the wall behind it. The initials C.R. Clifford Redpath, a mark left in defiance or desperation. We'll never know, but it tells us he was there, in that room, before the end. Was it where he was kept, watched, controlled? The clues are few, but they all point to confinement, to a life restricted by fear and manipulation. That mark was his last act, his name etched into the house that took everything from him. The mansion was demolished days later. No ceremony, just dust and rubble. But something curious followed. For months, city officials blocked new development on the site, no reason given. When construction finally resumed, a portion of the land was left untouched, unbuilt. A small plot covered in grass, marked only by a wrought iron fence. There's no plaque, no explanation, just emptiness. It's as if the land itself resisted, as if some part of the past refused to be paved over. And Macabre, maybe that's the lesson. The dead do not always rest. Some truths fight to be remembered. Some names, erased from stone, return in whispers, in marks on walls, in stories that refuse to die. Clifford. Ada. Their voices are faint, but now you've heard them. The silence is broken, and once broken, it cannot be restored. After the demolition, Amy Redpath's legacy seemed secure. Her name engraved in the grand halls of McGill University, her portrait hung with honor in galleries, her story reduced to footnotes in biographies that praised her charity, her intellect, her supposed grace. But none mentioned the mansion, none mentioned the blood. History had been rewritten, and successfully, until a young archivist, Daniel Mercer, stumbled upon a sealed box in the McGill archives in 1992. It was mislabeled, Miscellaneous Receipts, 1901. But inside, Mercer found something far more significant. A collection of letters, carefully tied in red twine, brittle with age. The sender, Ada Redpath. The recipient, unknown. These were drafts, unsent for a reason. The final one, dated June 10th, 1901, read, "I fear I will not be allowed to leave. Clifford grows weaker. The doctor says it is his illness, but I suspect something else. Amy watches me constantly. There is a heaviness in this house, and I do not feel safe." Those words struck Mercer deeply. He read them again and again, trying to reconcile them with the official story. But this letter, the handwriting confirmed, the date undeniable, was a crack in the foundation of the Redpath myth. Mercer took it to his superiors. They told him to file it quietly and not pursue it further. He didn't. But the letter haunted him. He copied it, kept it hidden for years. And in 2003, on the anniversary of the Redpath deaths, he published a small essay in an obscure historical journal, outlining the contents of the letter, the inconsistencies in the Redpath case, and the quiet power of one woman's fear trapped on paper. The essay went unnoticed by most, but not by all. A local historian picked it up. Then a journalist. Then the story began to breathe again. Quietly, questions were asked. The Redpath legend no longer seemed unbreakable. It had cracks. And though the release of Ada's letter did not cause an explosion, it was a tremor, subtle but unrelenting. In the quiet corridors of academia, debates began to stir. What else had been hidden, and why had so many accepted the Redpath story without question? Historians revisited archives long thought exhausted, old court records, funeral registries, private correspondence. And then, in a dusty file deep in the municipal archives, another fragment surfaced, a police ledger from June 1901, its ink faded, but one line visible. Redpath residents refused entry, no report filed, instructed by superior, case closed. No name, no badge number, just that one line, proof that law enforcement had been turned away, ordered into silence. But who had that kind of authority? The answer led to a man named Frederick Holton, Montreal's chief of police at the time, and a close friend of Dr. Roddick. The connection was direct. Holton had attended Redpath family events, shared social circles, and was known for his discretion. When the deaths occurred, it was Holton who ensured the scene remained untouched by outside eyes. No investigation, no photographs, no public inquiry. This was not incompetence, it was control, an orchestration of silence. And now, with these details emerging, the story shifted from tragedy to conspiracy. Amy Redpath's role became undeniable, not just as a grieving daughter, but as an executor of a calculated erasure. Her hands didn't need to pull the trigger, she only needed to ensure that no one ever looked too closely. And for over a century no one did, but now the pieces no longer fit the official narrative. Now there are names, dates, evidence, and the once pristine legacy of the Redpath family begins to darken. But here's the part that chills the blood. No justice ever came, no trial, no reckoning. Just a slow, quiet unraveling of lies long accepted as truth. That is how all power operates, not with spectacle but with silence. The kind of silence that wraps around generations like a shroud passed down, never questioned. Until someone, somewhere, chooses to see. That someone now is you. You've walked through the lies, you've touched the bones of a forgotten truth. And with each step, the ground beneath you shifts. Because the past is not dead, it is speaking. And you have begun to listen. The unraveling did not stop with Ada's letter or the police ledger. A forgotten memoir surfaced, handwritten, unpublished, belonging to Charles Fenwick, a young journalist who had briefly covered the Redpath deaths in 1901. His manuscript, titled What I Could Not Print, had been tucked away in a library collection, misfiled and ignored for decades. In it, Fenwick recounts his brief but unsettling encounters with Amy Redpath. He was sent to the mansion the morning after the deaths, hoping for a statement. What he found, he wrote, was not a house in mourning, but a fortress. Servants avoided eye contact. Doors were locked. And Amy? She stood at the top of the grand staircase, her voice calm but sharp. There is no story here. Only grief. Respect it, or leave. Fenwick noted her eyes, clear, dry, unwavering. Not a trace of sorrow. He left, but curiosity followed him. Over the next week, he attempted to contact anyone tied to the Redpath household. Most ignored him. One, a distant cousin, agreed to meet once. They spoke in a park, far from prying eyes. The cousin's words were cryptic. Clifford feared her. He wrote to me once, said the house was closing in, that the walls had ears. Fenwick pressed for more, but the man refused. Days later, he left town. No forwarding address. Fenwick's articles were never published. His editor told him the Redpaths were off limits. Pressure had come from above. Stories pulled, files sealed. And so Fenwick, disillusioned, left journalism. But before he did, he wrote this. I cannot prove what happened in that mansion. But I know the difference between grief and control. And Amy Redpath controlled everything, the narrative, the evidence, the silence. She ruled that house like a sovereign over a kingdom of shadows. That manuscript, now public, is another crack in the facade. Amy's image continues to deteriorate, her once praised legacy now tainted by whispers becoming voices. These aren't just stories, they are fragments of a buried truth clawing its way back to the surface. The Redpath mansion may be gone, but the ground beneath it remains heavy, heavy with the weight of what was never said. Now, for the first time in over a century, the silence is breaking. Piece by piece, the truth is rising. And you are now part of it. There's no turning back, only forward, into the darkness. In 2005, a construction crew digging near the former Redpath Mansion site unearthed something unexpected, a rusted iron lockbox buried beneath layers of stone and soil. At first, it was dismissed as debris from the demolition, but its weight, and the initials engraved into its lid, stopped them cold. A.R. Amy Redpath. The box was turned over to city officials, who, under pressure from local historians, agreed to open it publicly. Inside was rot and rust, but among the decay 3 items survived: a silver locket, a folded parchment, and a stained handkerchief. The locket bore a faded photograph, Clifford and Ada side by side, unsmiling. The parchment? A fragment of Ada's handwriting, barely legible. "If anything befalls me, know it was not madness, but choice taken from me." That one line reignited the storm. News outlets picked it up, documentaries followed, and the story that had remained in shadow for over a century flooded into the public eye. The Redpath legend was no longer an elegant tale of tragedy. It was a crime, laid bare. Scholars demanded that institutions bearing Amy's name confront the truth. Some resisted, but others acted. McGill University, under intense scrutiny, opened its private Redpath archives. Within those walls, another truth waited. Letters from Amy, never released, detailing her obsession with legacy. One note written to Dr. Roddick revealed her fear. "If the truth emerges, everything we built dies with it. History must be protected." But history cannot be caged, not forever. The final blow came when a distant Redpath descendant, Amelia Redpath Sloan, released her private family records. In them, journal entries from Amy's later years surfaced, entries filled with regret, fear, and confession. In one, Amy wrote, "I did what had to be done, for the name, for the future, but they never left me. I see them in every shadow." That's the cost of silencing truth. It never truly leaves. It festers, waits, and returns. Clifford and Ada were buried in graves marked with words like beloved son and devoted mother. But now, beneath those simple stones lies a deeper meaning, a warning. The past does not die. It waits to be seen. And now, you've seen it. The Redpath Mansion Mystery is no longer just a story. It is a reckoning. One that changes how we see power, legacy, and the silence between official lines. The public outcry following the revelations was immediate and fierce. Statues of Amy Redpath, once symbols of civic pride, were quietly removed. Buildings bearing her name were renamed, but these gestures, public performative, could not erase what had already taken root in the minds of those who had followed the story. The question echoed, if this could happen in a family so revered, so embedded in the cultural fabric of a city, how many other legacies were built on silenced truths? The Redpath case became a symbol, not just of injustice, but of the ways institutions protect themselves, even from the truth. A national inquiry was proposed but never realized. Too many names, too many reputations at risk. Yet the damage was done. The myth had shattered, and in its place stood something far more powerful: awareness. People began to look differently at the past, questioning the polished biographies, the glowing tributes, the sanitized history that had long been accepted without thought. In Montreal, Clifford and Ada's graves became a quiet site of pilgrimage, not just for the curious, but for those who understood what had been lost, not just lives, but autonomy, voice, and dignity. Flowers appeared regularly, notes, small tokens of remembrance. One message, left anonymously, read simply, "We see you now." Amy Redpath's remains rest far from theirs, in a separate family plot, unvisited, unmarked by tribute. In death, as in life, she is alone. Not forgotten, but remembered differently. Not with reverence, but with reckoning. Her power, so absolute in her time, has dissolved under the weight of truth. And the house? The mansion that held so many secrets, now replaced by faceless modern buildings, still casts a shadow. People report unease on that block, a heaviness. Some say it's just the power of suggestion, the echo of a story now told. Others believe something remains, unfinished, unresolved. Because justice for Clifford and Ada never came in a court, it came through memory, through revelation, through the simple act of refusing to forget, and that is where you stand now. You have not just heard a story, you have carried it. You are part of the chain that broke the silence. And once broken, silence never holds the same power again. As the years passed and the truth spread beyond Montreal, something unexpected began to happen. The Redpath Mystery, once a local curiosity, transformed into a global case study of historical manipulation. Universities worldwide dissected it, not for the crime alone, but for what it revealed about the nature of legacy and control. Textbooks were revised, lectures delivered, and amid this academic scrutiny, one more revelation emerged, perhaps the most chilling of all. In 2010, a historian named Elise Morin, researching Canadian elite family networks, unearthed correspondence between Amy Redpath and a British financier, Lord Alistair Greaves. Greaves was no ordinary aristocrat. He was a shadowy figure linked to various industrial empires, many with ties to colonial exploitation and covert banking interests. Their letters were coded, cautious. But in one, dated 1899, Greaves writes, "The transfer of control must be swift. The matriarch hesitates. Prepare your course." The matriarch, Ada. Transfer of control, what control? It became clear. The Redpaths were not acting alone. They were enmeshed in something larger, a web of influence that spanned continents. Amy was not just preserving a family name, she was securing her family's place within a global structure that demanded obedience, control, and silence. The deaths in that mansion were not only about wealth, they were about alignment. Ada resisted. Clifford, perhaps too fragile, was an obstacle. Their removal was not merely personal, it was strategic. Afterward, Amy's financial moves connected her directly to Greaves's banking interests. Redpath funds flowed into European ventures, secret trusts and private holdings that ensured the family's wealth and influence for generations. But at what cost? What was lost beyond 2 lives? The answer: integrity, freedom, and truth. Power, when aligned with global influence, becomes nearly impossible to challenge, but the Redpath story broke through that wall, exposing even a sliver of what lies beneath the surface of respectable society. And now, men around the world, obsessed with truth, control, and self-mastery, look to this story not with fear, but with clarity. Because knowledge is power, and forbidden knowledge, the kind Amy tried to bury, is the most dangerous of all. You now hold that knowledge, and it changes you. You are no longer just a listener. You are part of the awakening. And that, more than anything, is what the Redpaths feared, that someone, someday, would see it all and refuse to look away. Lord Alistair Greaves did not vanish with time. His influence, like Amy's, seeped into foundations that still stand today, quiet, untouchable, cloaked in legitimacy, and within his archives, hidden until recently by heirs who feared scandal, was a ledger. One thin, leather-bound volume marked only by the word Concordia. That word, Latin for harmony, was far from innocent. It was the name of a discreet financial syndicate operating across North America and Europe, composed of industrial families, political insiders, and medical authorities. The Redpaths were members. More than that, they were gatekeepers in Montreal, ensuring the city remained aligned with Concordia's interests. What were those interests? Not only profit, but control of narratives, suppression of dissent, and elimination of variables. Variables like Ada and Clifford. The ledger listed contributions, meeting dates, and most disturbingly, resolutions. One entry in June 1901 reads, "Resolution number 47, Montreal. 2 obstacles identified. Action approved." This was not mere coincidence. The timing, the location, the cold language, it confirmed what whispers and fragments had only suggested. The deaths in the Redpath Mansion were sanctioned, not out of passion or chaos, but policy. Action approved, lives ended, legacy preserved. For Amy, this meant survival, not just for her but for everything the family represented. To defy Concordia was to risk obliteration, and so she obeyed, becoming both executioner and protector. But obedience has its price. Her later writings, torn, hesitant, speak of visits from men in black coats, of meetings she could not refuse, and of a promise made, "In return for silence, your name will endure." That promise was kept, for a time. Her name did endure, carved into stone, honored by those who never knew the truth. But stone erodes, and now her name carries something else, a shadow. That is how power works. It rises, consumes, and eventually collapses under the weight of the very secrets it tried to hide. The Concordia ledger is now locked in a vault, guarded by those who fear its release. But the story it tells is no longer theirs to control. It has escaped, through you, through all who dare to see beyond the veil. This is more than a mystery. It's a blueprint, a glimpse into how history is shaped not by truth, but by those who have the will to silence it. Until now, the power of Concordia did not end with the Redpaths. It expanded, its reach tightening around cities, institutions, and governments, all while remaining hidden behind polished names and noble causes. But like all secret systems, it left traces. Fractures. In the 1970s, a whistleblower known only as MR began leaking information to a small underground newspaper in Toronto. His writings, scattered and cryptic, referenced old families, financial manipulation, and what he called the Harmony Protocol, Concordia's internal directive for maintaining public order through strategic suppression. One name appeared repeatedly: Redpath. MR claimed that Amy's role extended beyond her family, that she became a regional coordinator, overseeing not just her own affairs, but others, managing donations to hospitals, universities, and churches not as charity, but as investment in influence. The Harmony Protocol ensured that those institutions would return loyalty with loyalty, never questioning, never revealing, and if someone did speak, resolution, silence, erasure. MR's final message before he disappeared in 1978 was this: Redpath was not the last, only the first to fall in full view. They refined the process after her. They learned from her mistakes. What mistakes? Not the crime, but the loose ends, the surviving letters, the hidden ledger, the box beneath the soil. Each revelation was a crack in the dam, and now that dam is breaking. In 2020, a descendant of MR searching through old belongings found a reel of film labeled simply The House. It was grainy, damaged, but unmistakable. Footage of the Redpath Mansion weeks before demolition, workers moving cautiously. And in one frame, what appeared to be a hidden staircase descending below the foundation. A basement? No record of it exists. The mansion's blueprints show no such structure, but in that brief clip the staircase says, he fades into darkness, a place never explored, never acknowledged. What was down there? Storage, or something more? A room for secrets, for meetings, for decisions that shaped the lives of many without their knowledge. The film ends abruptly, but its existence is proof there is still more to uncover. And you now carry that burden. The past is not passive, it calls, it demands. And when you answer, when you open your eyes fully, you step beyond the realm of safety. You enter the territory of truth, dangerous, unforgiving, but real. The descent continues. Are you still with me? The staircase beneath the Redpath Mansion, briefly glimpsed in that fragment of lost film, remains the most haunting enigma of this entire saga. After its discovery, a group of independent researchers driven by the story's resurgence examined the site using old city plans and ground-penetrating radar. What they found confirmed the worst. Beneath where the mansion once stood, the earth was not solid. There was a void, a chamber, unmarked, undocumented, a space purposefully hidden. Excavation was denied by the city. The official reason? Preservation of historical grounds. But unofficially, pressure mounted from unnamed benefactors tied to the institutions Amy had supported. Even after death, her influence, Concordia's influence, lingered. Yet fragments emerged. A single photograph leaked from a city records room showed the chamber mid-demolition in the 1980s. A stone room, octagonal with strange symbols carved into the walls, circles, keys, eyes, symbols found in Concordia's ledger. Symbols of control, surveillance, obedience. This room, it seemed, was no mere basement. It was a place of assembly, a council room, a sanctum. Here decisions were made in silence. Here the fates of Ada and Clifford were likely sealed, not through violence but through consensus. The family was not murdered by rage. It was judged. And Amy? She wasn't just a daughter. She was a vessel for an older power, one that demanded loyalty above all else. In her final diary entry, never published but found among Amelia Redpath Sloane's archives, Amy writes, "They promised peace. But peace is a lie told to those who obey. In truth, there is only order, and order demands sacrifice." Her words confirm what was long feared. She knew. She chose. And in choosing, she became both prisoner and warden. Now that chamber is sealed again, buried beneath concrete and silence, but its existence undeniable. Its shadow stretches through time. Because this isn't just about one family, one night, one house. It's about how power maintains itself through hidden rooms, sealed records, obedient institutions, and the silence of those who fear the truth. But you do not fear it. You have walked the path. You have heard the voices beneath the stone, and you now understand the past is not dead. It waits. And it waits for those brave enough to listen. The chamber beneath the Redpath Mansion was the heart of it all, a place of decision, of silence, of power cloaked in ritual. What occurred there we may never fully know, but every trace points to a council beyond law, beyond scrutiny. Concordia's nerve center in Montreal. Witnesses, rare, long silent, have begun to speak. In 2021, an elderly man named Louis Renault, a retired city surveyor, came forward anonymously. In the 1960s, he had been assigned to review the structural integrity of the Redpath property. What he found unsettled him. There was a staircase, he said, but it was concealed beneath a false floor in the library. I wasn't supposed to find it. When I reported it, they told me to leave it alone, that I'd seen nothing. Renault was silenced with threats and a quiet transfer to a remote district. But he remembered. The stonework, he said, was older than the mansion itself, older than the city's records. It felt ancient, like it wasn't built by the Redpaths, but kept by them. That detail is critical, because it reveals the truth. The Redpath family did not create Concordia. They served it. The chamber was a relic, preserved across generations, a tool for control, for decision-making hidden beneath the surface of respectable society. Amy was its steward, but she inherited a legacy of shadows, one that demanded loyalty, sacrifice, and silence. And yet, she left behind traces, not by accident, but by design. Amy's guilt was never public, but in her final act, funding the preservation of historical records, donating to archives, she ensured the truth would eventually surface. Why? Because power cannot be erased, only transferred. Amy's world depended on obedience. But she knew one day someone would question, someone would see. That someone is now you. The chamber is gone, the mansion erased, but the structure remains, not in stone but in systems, in institutions, and the stories we're told to accept without question. The Redpath Mansion was not an isolated mystery. It was a symbol of how control is built, quietly, ruthlessly, and with a smile. And now, for the first time, that control is cracking. The truth is no longer buried. You have found it, and in finding it, you are no longer who you were. You carry the burden now. The question is, what will you do with it? What will you do with it? That's the question Amy Redpath never wanted asked. The question Concordia tried to bury with brick, silence, and fear, because truth, once seen, demands action. And this truth is heavy. The Redpath Mansion was merely the visible wound, the bleeding point in a network far larger, far older. Concordia still exists, Not by that name, but in essence. It lives in every decision made behind closed doors, every archive sealed, every story erased before it could take root. But now, a crack has split the foundation. The mansion is gone, yet its story refuses to die. And that story, as you've seen, is not about ghosts or tragedy. It's about power. Real, systemic power. Power that decides who is remembered and who is forgotten. Power that kills not with bullets but with silence. The deaths of Ada and Clifford were not senseless. They were method. They were message. Obey or be erased. And Amy obeyed. She became the architect of her family's erasure, the steward of Concordia's will, a woman who sacrificed blood for legacy. But in her final days, she knew. Legacy built on silence is fragile. That's why the locket, the letters, the chamber, all remained. Not oversight, not failure, but an offering. A key for those who would come after, those with eyes to see and ears to hear what was hidden in plain sight. And now you hold that key. You've walked through the ruins, followed the descent, and now stand at the edge of something deeper. Not just the Redpath truth, but the wider truth. The world we live in is shaped by unseen hands, by alliances formed in secret, bound not by law, but by power. The Redpath Mansion Mystery is a mirror, and in it you see not just their past, but your present, and maybe your future. Because knowledge, once accepted, changes you. It strips away illusion. It demands choice. Will you forget? Will you turn away? Or will you carry this truth to yours? Reach into the light, where it cannot be buried again. This story is no longer theirs. It's yours. Speak it, share it, remember it, and never, ever let it die. The final remnants of the Redpath legacy are not in archives, not in plaques, not even in graves. They are in the minds of those who dared to uncover what was never meant to be seen. You are now among them. You've crossed the threshold, seen beyond the surface of polite history, and felt the cold breath of truth. That breath, the echo of Ada's silenced voice, of Clifford's final mark, of Amy's calculated control, lingers in every corner of this mystery, and now it lingers with you. But understand this, the Redpath Mansion was not an end, it was a beginning, the first fracture in a world carefully arranged by those who fear only one thing, exposure. Concordia was a machine of control. Its parts were families, institutions, alliances forged in dark rooms and hidden chambers. But machines break, and this machine has begun to fail. Because power built on lies cannot withstand revelation. You have seen the blueprint. You have followed the descent. You have felt the unease that comes when the curtain falls away. And now you must decide, will you turn from it, pretend it was just a story, or will you carry it forward, let it change how you see the world, how you question, how you seek? The past is not silent. It speaks to those who listen. And now you've listened. The next move is yours. If you feel this story matters, if it gripped you, unsettled you, awakened something in you, then help it spread. Like the whisper of Ada's final plea, let this truth move through the shadows and reach others. Share this story. Speak it aloud. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more forbidden truths like this one. Stories they don't want you to hear. Like, share. And comment below these words. I see through the silence. Write it twice to lock in your transformation, to join the growing number of men who will no longer be blind to history's lies. You've seen the Redpath Mansion for what it truly was, not a house but a stage for power's darkest performance, and now you carry the truth. Never let it die.